The XF 14mm f2.8 is an older Fujifilm lens that doesn't get talked about much. Based on what I've seen, it seems to get overshadowed by many other popular Fuji lenses of a similar focal length, like the 16mm f1.4, the 16mm f2.8, and the 16 to 55. But despite that, I've always been interested in this lens. I found it unique, interesting, and a potential candidate for my kit. And luckily, I've had the opportunity to test it out for a few weeks. But I didn't get that much time with it though because one of those weeks I was sick. So these are just going to be my first impressions of this lens. Let's get started. General impressions. At a glance, this seems to be a very fun lens. It's got a nice shape, isn't too big, and seems to be of decent build quality. And one of the first things you'll notice is the manual clutch mechanism. Unlike many standard lenses, this lens has the ability to switch between manual focus and autofocus simply by pulling down the clutch mechanism. This is an interesting feature of many of Fuji's older lenses. In my experience, however, it's neat, but not necessary. I typically don't find myself needing to switch between manual and autofocus that often, and if I do, there's always a button on the body itself. This lens also has an aperture ring with clicks. I always welcome aperture rings in general, but this one seems to be a bit loose in particular. I found myself bumping it occasionally and accidentally switching the aperture. Another great point about this lens is the filter size. It's got a 58mm filter size, meaning it shares the same filter as many other Fujifilm's lenses. This includes lenses like the 18 to 55, 33 1.4, and I believe 23 1.4 as well, the newer one. So if you want to standardize your filters and build a 58mm filter kit, this lens could be an option in that as well. So overall, the lens is of good build quality. I think it's metal, but it's fairly light and quite portable as well. It's an older Fuji lens, so I wouldn't put the build quality on par with some of the newer Fujifilm lenses, but it's still pretty good. Let's move on to photography. Photography. In my time with this lens, I only had the chance to take it out a few times. And I also had other bodies and lenses I was testing, so my experience is kind of mixed. But I'll share with you guys what I've got so far. This is probably the widest lens I've used. I don't typically shoot super wide, and the widest lens I had before this was the 16 to 55. This might be because I don't typically find myself needing a wider lens or in situations where a wide lens is necessary. It feels a little niche, and I personally prefer having a all-purpose sort of focal length. But regardless, I think we were able to get a few decent shots. The lens itself worked quite well, especially on newer Fujifilm bodies. I was initially worried it'd have some autofocusing problems because it is an older lens, but it seemed to work quite well for photography. And as for the focal length itself, it's wide. When I was trying to take photos with it, I found myself too far from my subjects every time, which is crazy because I feel like to make proper use of this lens, I'd have to get super close or just be taking a picture of something huge, or maybe if I'm doing like real estate or architecture type photography. So the focal length itself does seem to be quite situational. I think if I had this lens when I was at an event like Coachella, I could have made use of the wide angle to properly capture crowds and big things. But for open spaces and other situations, you have to really make sure you have stuff to fill your frame with. Otherwise, everything is a bit far and your subjects become small. But overall, I did enjoy my time with this lens. Optically, it seems to perform quite well, and I'm surprised it doesn't get talked about more. So, no problems with photography in my experience. Let's talk about video. Video. When I was looking into this lens, I was ironically more interested in using it for video than I was for photo. This is because I needed something wider to capture this room for talking head shots like this. And for a long time, I used the 16 to 55 as my main studio lens. But as you guys know, I've since sold that lens. And nowadays, I use the 18 to 55 to record myself, but it does feel a little close sometimes. However, in my time with the 14mm f2.8, I was able to record a few videos with it. And in some of my recent videos from about a month ago, you'll notice the wider angle field of view. I like that angle, I like that field of view, I think it looks good. Here's what I was most worried about though. Because this is an older lens, I was worried that autofocus wasn't going to be able to handle video for talking head shots like this. And I was worried that focus was going to be continually jumping in and out as I was trying to talk to you guys. I did try to research and look up any info on using this lens for video, but I didn't find anything that really covered my needs. And it seems like most people look at this lens for photography. So here's what I learned at least. Autofocus is good enough for a talking head shot. Focus breathing isn't too much of a problem, although you will hear the lens move in and out. This is because the focus motors are a fairly old tech, so you will hear noises as it adjusts. Now, this is only a problem if you're recording audio through a source that is close to the camera or through the camera itself. But if you have a good separate mic, it won't pick up the noises of your lens. So I found that nice because I just recently upgraded my mic, meaning this lens is a solid candidate for a wide-angle talking head shot lens. And if I do end up picking it up in the future, it'll be for that. So what are my final thoughts on this lens? After using the XF 14mm f2.8 for a few weeks, I found it to be a pretty decent lens. It's an older lens, meaning it's got an interesting shape, the manual focus clutch, and busier autofocus. However, I found the autofocus to work quite well for photography and decent enough for video. So it is a great lens, although I'm not sure if I would call it underrated. Looking at prices, you can grab this lens for roughly $300 at the time of writing. And its closest competitor seems to be the 16mm f2.8, which seems to be the small wide-angle prime of choice for many photographers. And that lens goes for about $250 to $300. Now, I've never used the 16mm f2.8, but it seems to be quite popular. And what does this mean? This means that although the XF 14mm is a pretty decent lens, you'd have to really want that extra 2mm or something special about this lens to choose it over the 16mm. But then again, these are just my first impressions. If you've used either of these lenses before, please do let me know your experience with them down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed watching this, if you found this helpful, please do share this with another friend. Also, check out The Sinking Sun. This is my latest photography zine that I've worked a lot on. And you can also grab a free 4x6 print in the link down below if you haven't yet. Thank you guys as always for watching. Have a great day. Bye.